Shalom. One of my favorite characters in the Talmud is Joshua ben Hananiah. Joshua ben Hananiah was born in the second half of the 1st century CE and died around 130 CE. He was a very learned, a very compassionate man, but a simple man who earned his living not primarily as a rabbi, but as a blacksmith. Sometimes he had soot on his face. He was not the most handsome of men. He was short. His features were a bit scrunched up. And however, even the Romans who were occupying Judea in those days recognized that this was a very learned man. And when the Jewish people needed a representative to intercede on their behalf with the Romans, they often chose Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah. Well, there's a story about him in which he is talking to the daughter of the Roman governor, who was very impressed with his learning. And she looked at him, noting that he wasn't very handsome, and said, "What a pity, such wisdom in such an ugly vessel." Well, Rabbi Joshua said to her, "What kind of vessels do you keep your wine in?" And she replied, "Well, we keep our wine in earthen vessels made out of clay." And he said, "Is that right? But you are from such an important family. You should be keeping your wine in silver vessels." Now, he didn't tell her that silver vessels turn wine sour. And so she ran to the marketplace and she bought up a lot of silver vessels. She had all of her family's storehouse of wine put into those silver vessels. And before long, the wine was absolutely spoiled. And her father was quite angry and said, "Who told you to put our wine in silver vessels? Who gave you that advice?" She said, "Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah." So the Roman governor summoned Rabbi Joshua and said, "Why did you give my daughter such advice?" And he said she was impressed with my learning, and she said that it was a shame or a pity that such learning was in such an ugly vessel, meaning I'm not a very handsome man. And the Roman governor said, "Well, aren't there people learned in Talmud who are handsome?" And Rabbi Joshua said, "That might be true, but if they were ugly, they would even be more learned." Well, this week's Torah portion is called Metzora, and it's about a disfiguring skin disease called leprosy. And I'm going to read to you a little bit just from the opening passage. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, Zot tihyeh Torat hametzora bayom tehorato. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, "This shall be the ritual for a leper at the time of being purified." And what follows are some very detailed instructions on how the priest is to inspect a person who is suspected of having leprosy. He was to look very carefully at the person's skin, and often he had to quarantine that person, put them outside of the camp, because leprosy was quite contagious. And when it was time to bring the person back in, once more, the priest looked at the discoloration on the person's skin to determine whether he was cured or not. Now, we might understand this Torah portion as being some kind of dermatological handbook for ancient doctors, but it can be understood on a deeper level as well. Perhaps the Torah is telling us not to get too hung up on the surface appearance of people. People come in all different sizes and shapes, and some people are well dressed, some people are not so well dressed, and we must never be stopped at a person's appearance. But we must look past the surface and try to determine what this person's soul is about. Even someone who might not be very attractive, someone who might not seem to be on our socioeconomic or educational level, that person might have a lot to teach us. And what we are encouraged to do is to encounter that person, to see what's in that person's mind, to determine what the contents of that person's heart and soul might be. This, I believe, is the true meaning of this week's Torah portion. Well, I hope that you will read this week's Torah portion, Metzora, and come to your own conclusion. Shabbat Shalom.